Representative Seabaugh for a question.
Representative Jordan, I appreciate what you're trying to do. The language, the exact language that you're trying to strike is in the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the except...
Well, the exact...
it's close.
It's close.
The U.S. Constitution says, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted.
Right.
It's similar, same concept.
Similar, but not exact. Yeah, I want to just clarify that because I think you said exactly.
And we would agree that the language, except in the latter case as punishment for crime, the latter case is referring to the involuntary servitude. This has absolutely nothing to do with slavery. Is that correct? Do you know what the word latter means?
Absolutely. I know exactly what it means.
There's two things, slavery and involuntary servitude. So when it says, except in the latter case, it's referring to the second of the two mentioned in the list, which would be involuntary servitude, not slavery. Right. But grammatically, is that correct? Almost, but it's not. And I would not necessarily agree that they are the same. The problem that I have when I actually read this is I think this might be one of the most dangerous bills we've seen this session, simply because felony convictions are the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony is a misdemeanor is without hard labor. A felony conviction is with or without hard labor. I'm afraid this might open the door to a legal challenge of every felony conviction in the state of Louisiana. And that's just not a can of worms that I'm wanting to open right now. I've actually run this by some criminal justice people and some staff members, and they actually agree that it may not be a slam dunk argument, but it would certainly open the door to bringing challenges to literally every felony conviction in the state of Louisiana. And I get what you're trying to do, but I don't necessarily think this is a can of worms that we need to be opening right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can't. Somebody couldn't bring it up as an argument. It just strikes me as a solution looking for a problem, and you're looking to potentially open a can of worms that could be devastating to our criminal justice system in the state without any particular reason. I want to hear the testimony of other people, but I'm just giving you warning. I'm probably going to move to involuntarily defer the bill, but I'm going to wait till after I hear the testimony.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Seabaugh. Representative Jordan, have you talked to anyone from the Department of Corrections? I mean, because Representative Seabaugh does raise some questions that I thought about, and I spoke briefly with you about whether hard labor and involuntary servitude are equivalent. So if does that mean that if someone is sentenced to hard labor, could they be right? But if the 13th Amendment allows involuntary servitude in cases of punishment for a crime, but we take that out of our Constitution, my question would be whether would that mean that we wouldn't be able to have a real effect of sentence to hard labor? And I'm not talking about where you're leasing out convict labor, which I think is certainly something that I think you rightly bring up, that kind of has been a reprehensible part of the history. Is the state leasing out convict labor? But right now, I don't know if you're incarcerated I think most of the programs for the work release are voluntary on behalf of the person who's convicted.
I would think so.
They get a benefit. I think they get credits for good time and towards to an accelerated release. Thank you. Representative Landry for a question.
Rep. Jordan, I agree that no one should be forced to labor against their will or without fair compensation. If this would pass and the state of Louisiana would fairly compensate the incarcerated for their labor, could you discuss for us the benefits to the incarcerated, their families, and the state as a whole? That was my question, because I know I've discussed this with people in the past few years, that if people incarcerated were able to build up, a little fund, they could help support the family that may very well need them, but also to allow almost a nest egg for upon release, so to help with recidivism rates and just to help people get on their feet, because it's, as we all know in here, it's difficult to find a job, difficult to find housing, and I just feel like this would be a good investment by the state as well to work on recidivism, but also allow people to assist their children and families while they're incarcerated. So I support this, and I think it's extremely progressive and open-minded, and what we should be thinking about in terms of criminal justice reform in the state.
Thank you, Representative Frieman, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rep. Jordan, thank you for bringing this bill. I've listened to your comments in answering questions, and one of the things that I keep coming back to is you saying that in the U.S. Constitution, similar language is already there, and that the 13th Amendment would kick in and override the state constitution when it comes to hard labor. So my question is, what are you trying to accomplish by taking it out of the state constitution if the federal constitution is going to trump anyway? And again, the U.S. Constitution was crafted and amended and so forth to address certain things that occurred in our history. Obviously, one of them being slavery, and it outlawed it well before I think the Louisiana Constitution ever mentioned it. So again, I don't see a obvious purpose to what you're doing, and the fact that our Constitution is consistent with the federal Constitution tells me I don't really think there's a need to address this. But I appreciate you bringing the bill, and we'll probably just kind of disagree.
No, prison.
And I appreciate that, Representative Jordan. I know your heart's always in the right place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jordan, you're a very skilled legislator. I've learned a lot from you.
I don't know, but I appreciate that.
Words mean things. But this is set up in such a way that I'm afraid, I worry that if you were to disagree and vote against this bill, it might appear to some that a vote no would be a vote yes for slavery. That's certainly not your intent. That's certainly not what would be perceived accurately, would it?
No, that's not my intent. I tell you what, I'm sure that's not your intent, but I don't know if that wouldn't be the impact about that. And I'm joking slightly, but I know. But
and I meant that as a compliment to you that you. So, I mean, the law, and I appreciate where you're going, but this is being billed as an anti-slavery bill. Well, everybody up here, I would hope, is anti-slavery. The law clearly says, even with or without your change it, slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited. Well, you mentioned some examples like the monopoly on the use of the cell phones or phone communication. Man, file a bill that deals with that. You mentioned the leasing of prisoners for work. As I understand, they do get a fund, or there is money put aside. I'd be all for if they're going to do that, because we're going to have a bill in a little while talking about child support that's owed and incurred while people are incarcerated. That's a win-win if you could work that out. I just wish we could take the problem as you very well describe them and address them clearly, and not put ourselves in a possible situation of being much more than what you even intended. And so I appreciate your testimony, appreciate you bringing this. I know where your heart is also, and always respect that, always appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, Representative, for bringing the bill. I certainly can see the direction that you're going in, and I have no disagreement with the direction that you're going in. I think sometimes we look at people getting a prison sentence and think that not only restricts their freedom, but do you agree that we need to spend and invest more on the correctional side when someone gets a prison sentence?
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily a matter of someone being sent to prison to work for free from sun up to sundown. Is that right?
That is right.
And I think there should be no exception
When I read this, it says slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited, but it makes an exception. I think there should be no exception to that. That's something that we just should not have in our society. And if we're going to have correctional facilities, what I found is that we simply do not invest enough in the correctional side when someone is in prison to try to improve their lives and try to make them a better citizen when they are released from prison. So I think this is worthy to look at. I certainly want to hear what other people have to say about it, but I can certainly see where you're coming from when you say there really should be no exception to this. It's almost like saying such and such, but thank you for the courage to step forward and bring these discussions where they need to be, which is in this building among diverse people, so that we could kind of see, where we are with many of these ancient documents in old language and what we need to do to try to correct it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Marino.
Thank you. I've actually would really like to hear from the Department of Corrections on what they think the impact of that would be, because I had not even thought about that, what that means about whether or not that means you can sentence people to hard labor if we remove it. I mean, I would really like to hear what their reaction to that is, or what their opinion of that is.
I would too.
Right. Because I'm not, I don't think I have to say that, I'm interested in prison reform and jail, and, because I think it's necessary, but that's a point that I wish I'd heard or had the opportunity to call or speak to him before right now. But I have to, Mr. Chairman, I do have to go. They're calling me over to appropriations to vote to run a bill right now, but I might be back in time to vote on this, because I think that may be here for a while.
We have a couple of people want to speak.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Marino. Representative Larvadain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rep, for this bill. All you're doing is trying to prohibit the word slavery and indentured servitude in the Constitution.
Involuntary servitude.
Involuntary.
Right.
That's all you're doing.
Right.
You're not trying to get every felon released from prisons.
Absolutely not.
And your intention is not to release everybody to Angola and hunts everybody's free.
No.
All you want to do is let's deal with this language and try to correct some past wrongs.
That's correct.
I wish as a body that we would put more resources in assisting folks once they're incarcerated with homelessness, drugs, mental illness, so they will not repeat this type of conduct.
I agree with you.
Okay. And so by no means are you trying to do anything. I think we were going off on a tangent or going somewhere further, and I don't want to go that way. I want to just stick to what we have. If you look at the language on, let's look at the amendment. Do you support an amendment to prohibit the use of involuntary servitude as a punishment for a crime? Are you content with that language, or should we address that language differently?
It could be addressed slightly differently.
And I think when you talk about involuntary servitude and slavery, I think people get upset and get uncomfortable. And then I think some people go in different directions. But your intention is just to deal with involuntary servitude and slavery, but the intent is not to release everybody from incarceration.
Let me say this to you, Rep. And this is the best way I think I can say it. I think we've become so desensitized to what involuntary servitude really is that we think it's okay.
No, it's not okay.
So, and that's as simple as I think as I can put it.
All right. Thank you for those answers.
Thank you, Representative Larvadain. Representative Jefferson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jordan, thank you again, as Mr. Vice Chairman indicated, for making us work and think, because that's a good thing as we move forward. As I've often said, there are more things that unite us than divide us.
Absolutely.
But I think more than anything, not to go into the tangent that everyone has indicated, and we all agree as relates to, those individuals who are incarcerated. But I think more than anything, as I was going through this in the last few days, you're just basically indicating that words matter.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think as we go forward, we have to be sensitive. And I've heard you this morning. You've been very methodical, in what you're saying. And because of the time in which we live, you want to make sure, and you're looking at it from a contextual standpoint as well. You can't just say this is what it means, but you have to look at the totality of the circumstance. Again, thank you for, again, making us think and making us work, because as Mr. Vice Chairman indicated, we all, again, want to make sure that Louisiana is a better place. And perhaps this is one means that we can address to ensure that we understand from a contextual standpoint to where we are. Because if you don't know where you've come from, you will be meandering to and fro, and you'll just continue like the dog wagging is chasing, his tail and what have you. So again, thank you for what you've done and for the discussion. And I too, like Representative Marino, would be interested to hear from the department and also from the individuals who've come here to testify.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Jefferson. All right. We've got a lot of people that want to speak, and I want to just ask those of you who are going to speak to be respectful of everyone's time, that there's other people also that want to speak. So if you can make sure that you keep your remarks on point. So first off, I'm going to call up President would like to speak, Curtis Davis from Decarcerate, Louisiana. Now, did you intend to do a white card or a green card in support?
I intended to do a card to speak.
Okay, so, all right. Next up, speaking, Amanda Smith and Andrea Nasca. And again, I want to make sure we realize we've got a lot of people that want to speak. So,
thank you.
Hey, Representative Johnson, do you have a question? Thank you.
Am I to understand that you are opposed to people who've been convicted of a crime and sentenced to prison? You're opposed to them working to help pay for some of the, in 2005, so it's much more now, $16,000 to $20,000 a year that each inmate costs the state. You believe that this law would change that, and they wouldn't have to, or they wouldn't have any responsibility to help contribute to the cost that they have on the rest of the law-abiding citizens of the state?
Just speak closer to your mic, please.
I guess what I'm wondering, and you believe that if we take out these 3 or 4 words from the current state constitution that prohibits slavery, that no longer would those prisoners who've been convicted of a crime and sentenced to prison would be forced to work or forced to do anything to help pay for the cost of incarceration to the rest of the state?
I don't see that that's an issue.
Then I'm not sure I understand what, because I've heard several folks say that.
So when you open up this can of worms where people can be punished for a crime and forced to work, I mean, you're just right back where we were, in the United States, where they didn't have labor laws.
Okay, so you don't believe that people who have committed a crime, a criminal act, and been sentenced to jail, to prison for their crime, that they should, if even sentenced to hard labor, you don't believe, and there's a mindset that you don't believe they should be forced to do anything to help assist in the payment of their incarceration?
At Angola, people are still picking cotton on original slave plantation.
Yes, ma'am.
Just imagine it.
Horrible thought.
Right, and I'm not.
I don't want any of those people to have to do that.
Okay,
but I didn't put them.
Well, that's
there.
what you're.
I didn't commit the crime. I didn't get the sentence.
That doesn't matter, sir.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
So you're saying that if someone's convicted of a crime, then they have no human dignity in
not
anything?
At all.
That's
not
what
all.
you're saying.
I'm saying that I don't believe what you're describing to me will be eliminated, or maybe that's your intent, will be eliminated by changing this law by those few words. And you're saying you hope that it does.
Correct.
Okay. That's just a difference of opinion. I'm not saying you're right or wrong, or I want to understand, because I've heard the same idea expressed several times, and I just want to know where you're coming from.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Representative Laverdane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, let me clarify something. Your concern is that a person who's incarcerated making 4 cents an hour is just straight wrong. Is that what your opinion is? And also, you mentioned that a person that does not want to, a person who's incarcerated who does not want to go to work, they're forced to eat a loft.
Food loaf.
Food loaf. Explain what that is again.
It's just another punishment to
Explain what it is.
a food loaf. Okay, so you take all the food from that day that was served to the prisoners.
All right. If you
and
had
you mash it up and put it in a loaf and bake it. So all the leftovers and everything.
That's rice, beans,
greens, cornbread, greens, whatever it is. They stick it in a loaf, bake it. It's very just not something you would want to eat.
And where they serve
Something you
that,
would feed to your
and where
dog.
they serve that to it, Angola and Hunts, or where?
I for sure Angola.
How do you know it's served there? You've seen it?
I've spoken to people.
Okay. Now you also mentioned.
You have people right here that can.
You also mentioned that the 4 cent to 40 cent is just all depends on how many. What's it? Why is there a difference between 4 and 40 cent? Who determines that?
I have no idea. That's the information from Prison Policy Initiative. That's the wages that the prisoners were given.
And your testimony is that you don't feel that people should not work. It's just that they should not work for 4 to 40 cents. That's correct. Is that your testimony?
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Amedée. Representative Frieman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're a member of Decarcerate Louisiana, correct? Is it accurate that your organization envisions a world without prisons?
Prisons I think everybody would.
That would be true if we'd have no criminals, but the problem is we've had criminals since the beginning of this world.
Exactly.
So
we know that prisons will not go away altogether. But do you like where it is right now? Do you think this is a good place for your state?
you can't answer, but I give you to answer the questions. You can't ask the questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I appreciate your passion. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And we take that as a rhetorical question. But thank you, Representative Frieman. Okay, we still have a few more, so members keep that in mind, and those of you testifying. Ms. Andrea Nasca, Ms. Sanders, would you please call the roll?
Representative Amedée? No. Representative Robbie Carter? Representative Wilford Carter? Yes. Representative Echols? No. Representative Emerson? No. Representative Frieman? No. Representative Hodges? Representative Jefferson? Yes. Representative Jenkins? Yes. Representative Johnson? No. Representative Landry? Yes. Representative Larvadain? Yes. Representative Marino? Representative Muscarello? No. Representative Nelson? No. Representative Presley? No. Representative Seabaugh? No. 5 yeas, 9 nays.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Jordan. Okay.